Hello guys, Crispy here, welcome back to another video. In this one, my friends, I'm going to be testing a GeForce GTX 1650 4GB GDDR5 in the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion Remastered. This one is the Gigabyte Mini ITX OC model of the card. I am running it with the latest Nvidia drivers and I'm not manually overclocking it. You can see all of its specs right here in Tech Power-Up's GPU Z, and over on the left I am pairing it with the i5-12600KF CPU, KFC, and 32GB of DDR5. Just so we don't bottleneck it, although, yeah, this is gonna be a pretty bad experience probably, because right at the start of the game, we can see that it says that our PC doesn't meet the system requirements, specifically the GPU with its 4GB of VRAM, and it says that it requires 6GB or more. Still, we can launch the game, so let's find out what the 1650 is capable of. Shall we? Let's go over the settings first. We're starting at 1080p resolution, utilizing the lowest settings here. As you can see, Lumen software ray tracing is turned on because we can't really turn it off outside of the config files, and I will actually install a mod to turn it off completely in just a little bit, but for now, we're starting with the default lowest settings from the game. Anti-aliasing is also turned off. That's a terrible idea, but well, we're gonna roll with these settings first. Okay, here we have it, my friends. Oh my, this is awful. Okay, so we're getting less than 20 frames per second on 1080p lowest settings in the GTX 1650. The textures are also taking a really long time to load, especially on that blood on the sword, you know. And you can see that there's a major popping issue right now because of the lowest settings in the game. The grass just keeps on popping in as we walk, and it's really distracting. But I think the most distracting thing right now is actually that frame rate, of course, which is absolutely awful. These frame rates are something that I would expect coming from like a GTX 1630 with these graphics as well, because, you know, that should get 16 to 30 frames per second. Anyway, looking at the sky, it actually goes over 40 FPS, so I guess this is adequate for a GTX 1650 to get 16 to 50 frames per second. Let's stop it at. Okay. So, anyway, guys, the game is not really that great looking for the performance it gets. We're all used to it at this point because it's a recent title, and it's also a UE5 title, Unreal Engine 5. So, of course, it's gonna run like crap, especially on a 4GB GPU like the GTX 1650, and especially when it's not a well-optimized title whatsoever. At the very least, guys, I am seeing a bit less stuttering than I saw with some other GPUs. It seems like whenever you are close to being CPU-bound or you are CPU-bound completely, it actually stutters way more than in a full GPU-bound scenario. Anyway, it's time for us to change things up. Let's try utilizing some upscaling here in the form of FSR. I'm gonna use FSR Performance. This will render the game at 540p resolution and look like crap, basically. Yes. Oh my god, it's so bad. Also, whoa, that is a lot of motion blur. I wonder if it enabled FSR Frame Generation as well. Yeah, it's on by default. I can't disable it. Wait, what? This is the first time that I've seen it, guys. Frame Generation is grayed out. It's not available for us to change. So we can't use FSR Performance without Frame Generation here with the 1650. That's so weird. Yeah, and that means, oh my god, look at that ghosting. Holy crap. Duplicated swords, guys, on the right. Look at that. Jesus Christ. That's all because of FSR Performance, by the way. Even without the frame generation, it does that. So yeah, the upscalers in this game are just terrible. It's probably the worst implementation of FSR, XeSS, and DLSS that I've ever seen. They love to make these games ray traced by default, and then things are pixelated as heck, and then they need to utilize temporal anti-aliasing, TAA or TSR as well, to fix it. And well, those are terrible anti-aliasing techniques, and they have really bad ghosting and motion blur everywhere. Also, about the stutters that I was telling you about previously, at least the game doesn't stutter. That's not the case anymore. You can see that there's a stutter every like second or so, even less than that probably. So yeah, it is a really terrible experience. If I start counting the FPS here, the 1% lows are going to hell instantly. 16 frames per second there on a 1%. So, yeah, not playable so far here. Oof, look at that frame time now. Jesus. Definitely not playable. Let me just disable the FSR now. I'm gonna use some XeSS, because this way we can actually test some upscaling without frame generation. And with XeSS performance, which is the same 540p resolution, I think, yeah, XeSS sometimes uses a little bit different of a resolution scaling, so yeah, between presets, you know. But yeah, we're getting 20s instead of those 16 to 20 that we were seeing before. So it's a little bit better, but it's also more unstable, I think. That frame time is a lot worse. Okay. So not a strong start at all for the little GTX 1650, right? Let's drop it down to 720p right away. And this is 720p native resolution with the lowest settings. Lumen software ray tracing is set to low. No anti-aliasing either. That's why everything is shimmering. Look at that. Yep. Pixelated heck. Jesus. Okay, goodbye, sir. Sorry. All right, let's keep on going. So at least this gives us around the same FPS as XeSS Ultra Performance did, or was it Perform? Yeah, Ultra Performance. So that was 360p, not 540p upscaled, I think, with XeSS, if it was Ultra Performance. I think it was Ultra Performance. Anyways, 20-something FPS. It's not dropping into the teens here, and this area is actually pretty intensive because it has a lot of trees and stuff, so you usually see a little bit lower FPS here than where we started this video at, near the initial part of the game actually, exactly after the tutorial part. So yeah, the fact that we're getting 20-something FPS around here means that over there it would probably get like 2 or 3 more frames per second, which is not really going to be game-changing at all, unfortunately. What I'm most surprised about is that the Steam Deck actually runs this game a little bit better than this, even though the Steam Deck only has 16 gigabytes of RAM, and the Steam Deck also uses RAM as VRAM, so it's shared, okay, it's an APU, and this game is clearly allocating 4 gigabytes of VRAM on our 1650. It already went over it, so it had to swap into RAM, and the RAM is at 18 gigabytes at the moment. So I don't know how the Steam Deck does it, but okay, some people are actually playing on Steam Deck. Now, let's try it with some FSR. Again, let's do FSR performance. Frame gen comes on by default at 720p resolution. It is a much more stable experience in terms of the frame rate. It's getting 50s now. Okay, that's a big rat over there. All right. Oh my god, they still haven't fixed the animations here. Basically, whenever you're looking at the sky, or not even at the sky, like you're looking up like this, and then you turn your camera down, there is always this skip, you know? Look at that. That's not stuttering or anything, it's just the animation. It happens with every system out there playing this game. It's just, yeah, it's really weird and wonky and wobbly and yeah, it's clunky basically, alright? Still, what puts me off the most is the amount of softness and ghosting. Look at that. Look at the ghost. You can clearly see duplication of the sword and the arm and stuff. It's so bad. Look, whoa. Especially when it does this. Yeah, what the hell, dude? Anyway, guys, 60 FPS experience is somewhat possible, I guess, with tons of stuttering here and FSR frame generation enabled as well. But it is definitely a terrible experience because it looks like a smudge. It looks probably worse at this point than the original title from 20 years ago. Yes. So you're much better off just playing the original on a GTX 1650 and modding it and making it look better with higher resolution textures and stuff like that. And some mods for other stuff like reshades, whatever. Do that instead of buying this remastered version. It's also overpriced for a remastered, in my opinion, but a lot of people are fine with that. Yeah, don't spend your money on this. It costs the same as your GPU costs these days, so that's a red flag. But let's try to make it better, shall we? I'm gonna disable the upscaling again. We're gonna keep it at 720p resolution, and we're back here in this initial area to check it out. Yeah, you know what? Let's stand right here near this pole and look at the top of that rock over there. So this is the picture here. with software ray tracing set to low. It could look worse, but it definitely doesn't look good whatsoever, and a 1650 should be doing way better than it is at the moment. You're getting 31 frames per second right there, with a lot of micro stutters there in the frame time graph as well. Now we're gonna install this mod right here, Lumen Begone. Disable RT for better performance, and they show us a little bit of a difference here with the Steam Deck actually, 29 FPS going to 32 FPS, quite a bit of a difference in terms of the lighting as well. Over here, I actually think that the non-Lumen stuff looks better, and it also gets us like 5 more FPS as, no, not as, the guy that tested this and made this mod. Yeah, over here 7 FPS difference, major difference in lighting as well. But let's install the mod. All you need to do is download it, of course, and follow the instructions here. Okay, we're back here. Let's take a look at the quality settings again. Graphics settings. Still says software ray tracing set to low. Okay, interesting. And here we have it, guys. Exact same place. We're getting double the FPS. Jesus. Well, it's now dropping like crazy. What happened there? We started at 61 FPS, now we're getting 48, 49, with major spikes in that frame time graph. I think it was still probably loading some textures, and it moved those textures into RAM because the VRAM wasn't enough, and now it dropped performance and also started stuttering like crazy. So yeah, in terms of visuals, I mean, I'm not seeing things side by side, but I'm gonna put it side by side so you guys tell me if there is a major difference. I mean, without seeing things side by side, it's fine. I think it's a little bit more blue in terms of the sky color, as well as like other things colors, like the shadows over here. It might be a little bit more blue, but this is still completely unplayable on GTX 1650. Look at that stutter, guys. I'm panning the camera around. You can, whoa, you can instantly tell the huge, absolutely terrible stutters happening here. So, once again, even though we made it playable in terms of frame rate now, or average frame rate actually, the 1% lows are so bad that this is not a playable experience still. Maybe there's a mod to lower the textures even further, so I'm gonna check it out and see if I can find one, but yeah, this is not a playable experience, even though we're getting decent FPS on average now. If you didn't have the frame time graph, it would be hard to tell. You could say it's probably like a rendering issue, the video is stuttering or something like that, but no, it's none of that. It's just the game is stuttering like that, okay? It's crazy. It has smoothed out though over here. Those spikes are a little bit smaller at the moment, and whenever the minor ones are happening, it's not too noticeable in terms of micro stuttering, but the big ones are still happening here from time to time, unfortunately. Maybe it just needed to load it for a little bit longer. What do you want, buddy? I'm gonna take your axe. But as I was saying, maybe it needed to load it for a little bit longer, but I mean, we're walking here. It's still getting us those major spikes from time to time, and it feels really bad. And not to mention that it looks terrible like this, obviously. Like, if you're not moving, at least the trees stop flickering, but the grass doesn't stop flickering at all. It's probably because of the wind, actually, but it's really bad. So, yeah, it's really terrible to see this as well, since we've seen way better looking games running a lot better on a GTX 1650 in the past, you know. So it is a shame to see where games are going. Looking worse, looking blurrier, looking more shimmery and noisy and stuff. And I guess maybe like the textures look better than older titles, yeah, and maybe there's a little bit more detail sometimes in some areas, but I still didn't imagine that games would be looking like this in 2025. Like, when this GPU released 2018, if you asked me if it would be capable of playing games in 2025, I would say no. Okay? So, yeah, that's exactly what we're seeing here with Unreal Engine 5 and this game in particular, some other titles as well. What I didn't imagine was that games would be looking like this in 2025 and running like they do. Because for the performance they get, most games should be looking a lot better than they do. And you might think, how can it look better? It already looks really, really good, like UE5s and stuff. I mean, again, for the performance these games are getting, they shouldn't be this intensive. Even like the 4090 when it came out in 2022, it was wrecking all of the games at 4K, high refresh rates, native resolution and stuff, almost all of them. And they looked great. And then this UE5 round of games came out, and it just wrecked performance. Even on GPUs like an RTX 4090, they started to struggle. It seems like developers forgot how to optimize games or just laid back because GPUs are so strong now that they don't need to optimize games. And that's not the case. Like, they do need to optimize games. Anyway, around this area, surprisingly, it's not stuttering as much. As you can see, it's getting 40-ish frames per second, so a little bit lower than what we were seeing before. But since it's not the open world, and I guess there aren't as many textures around, maybe. I mean, that RAM usage is actually higher now, so... but yeah, maybe it's because of it being a smaller space, it actually works pretty well in terms of stuttering. Right now, it started stuttering again. So when we entered, it was really flat, it was really smooth. Now it's starting to get really bad again. Let's go over that bridge once again, because it was fine a moment ago. But now it's micro-stuttering all over the place again. So, yeah, it's only for the first few seconds where you enter a city and stuff that you're not going to see stuttering, unfortunately. What a mess, guys. What a mess. At least disabling Lumen does help it a lot. All right, so there's that. Let's try some TSR over here. Yes, I want to apply it so you can see it. Yeah, it's definitely more intensive. You lose around 10 frames per second, which is a heck of a lot. It's like 25% performance there. At least the frame time went back to normal-ish. It's not stuttering as much. 30-ish FPS, but it's so blurry that I wouldn't really do this. Also, there is a lot less ghosting now with TSR enabled, although they're still ghosting, so, yeah. And it's really, really blurry. I don't know, guys. I don't think there is a perfect anti-aliasing option here in this title if you don't have an RTX GPU. That's really unfortunate. Let's try FSR on quality this time around with frame generation enabled. This should give us a good bump to the baseline FPS, you know, and now... with FG on top, yeah, it's actually a pretty decent experience, not too bad. Yeah, the frame rate is now really smooth. I would still not recommend this whatsoever, because in just a little bit it should start stuttering again. We already know that. Once we make a little change in the options menu, it actually is smooth for a while, and then it starts stuttering again. So not amazing, yes. But I'm still very surprised to see 90s and 80s there with the frame generation and a buttery smooth frame time graph right now. That is really flat at the moment. So yeah, not terrible, right? But once again, you do have a lot of ghosting here. You do have a lot of pixelation and just a really soft looking image, which does not look good whatsoever, in my opinion, so I would not really play like this. Maybe on a 7-inch display of the Steam Deck, for example, it would be okay, but on a native 1080p monitor, like 24 inches, I'm using a 27-incher one right now, it is awful like this. But anyway, it seems like the smoothest experience that you're gonna get here is definitely with quality FSR and the frame generation enabled, and even then, it's now starting to stuttering again. Yeah, it's just, look at that, 25 FPS, 1% lows, starting to load more things here in the open world. So I guess inside of cities, it's going to be a smooth experience with frame generation and these settings. But then you get outside, you travel the world a little bit, and it goes back to being the stuttery mess that it was. So with that said, guys, I think we should try 1080p just to see how it does, baseline FPS-wise. Come on, let's see. Yeah, below 30 FPS already. It's crap. Tons of stuttering as well, once again. Obviously, like 720p was already really terrible, so 1080p is not gonna be good whatsoever. Let me do like FSR performance again with the frame generation that we can't disable for some reason again. And now we're getting 50s. Yeah, input lag is atrocious once again. And it stutters like crazy. Once again, if I start counting the FPS, 1% lows are already crap. So yeah, that's been it for Oblivion Remastered on the 1650. If you needed reassurance that you shouldn't buy this game, well, I reassure you, you shouldn't buy this game. Buy the previous one, play the original one, install some mods on it that make it look prettier, and it will look and run 10 times better than this, probably. Not 10 times, otherwise it would be like 500 FPS. But yeah, you get the idea. Thanks for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed. Love you all. Bye-bye.